that working? Can you see?
Yes.
That's
Cool.
full screen.
Cool, cool, yay. Oh, and now it goes back. Okay, so sorry everyone. So today we're talking diversity and inclusion in community building. So it's really good for us to set some ground rules. So the first one is that you're here, which means you actually care about this topic, and that's amazing and awesome. So happy. The second is that the word diversity is really packed with meaning. Diversity can mean anything from your gender, your race and ethnicity, your age, your sexual orientation, all the way over to where you live, what languages you speak, what industry you work in. So diversity covers a lot. The third is that this presentation is going to be particularly focusing on building diverse communities. We're not going to talk a lot about how to fight discrimination, though these topics are tied together. In a similar manner, I'm not going to go over a lot of information about systemic discrimination and how and why discrimination happens in different cultures. At the very end of this slide deck, which I'll be sharing the slides out, there's a resources page that will have a whole bunch of more information if you're particularly interested in that. So the fourth ground rule that I really want to also talk about is that if your community has a lack of diversity or inclusion, this is typically not a purposeful discrimination. There's usually no one like a Darth Vader figure that's saying you can't be part of this community at all. Typically, it's because we have unconscious biases, or there are things about our community that don't work for certain types of groups of people, and we as community managers may not even realize that. So most of us today are building our communities on the internet. We have forums, we have social media, we have different groups. And because we're on the internet, that means we immediately have a global community. Anyone from anywhere who has an internet connection can reach out to us. And this really means that we cannot ignore diversity and inclusion. And in order to make it better in our communities, we must first understand ourselves, who we are, where we come from, how we interact with people, and then we have to start understanding others, particularly, of course, the people in our communities. And we always need to realize that mistakes do happen. This is actually the Moz community team minus our manager. And they happen a lot, you know, mistakes happen a lot, so we need to learn how to cope with them. So one of my favorite quotes about diversity comes from showrunner Shonda Rhimes. She runs shows such as Grey's Anatomy and Scandal, which are very popular in the United States. And she says, "I really hate the word diversity. It suggests something other, as if it is something special or rare, as if there is something unusual about telling stories involving women and people of color and LGBTQ characters on TV. I have a different word, normalizing. I'm normalizing TV." And what she's really saying is that she is writing characters and putting people on screen who reflect the actual diversity of the world that we live in. And this is really what I think of when I think of diversity and inclusion and what our communities should look like. So I'm going to go through and debunk 7 common myths that people like to use against diversity and inclusion in community building. The first one is that the internet, where we're all primarily building our communities, is a meritocracy. If you don't know what a meritocracy is, it's a system in which the talented are chosen and moved ahead on the basis of their achievement. So this is the idea that, like, if you're hiring for a role, you're going to hire the best candidate regardless of their backgrounds, and it's going to show in the things that they do and, you know, where they went to school or whatever. And what we find is that this is not true because our culture has biases in it, and the web is built on our culture. So this is a photo of some of Moz's community. This is at our annual conference, MozCon. This was the after party. And there's probably 8 or so kind of famous SEOs in this photo. But what this photo actually tells is a story of our community. And there's things that are happening in this photo that may not be inclusive for some people. For instance, we're drinking. Drinking is not acceptable for everyone in every culture. It's a very social event. People who are very extroverted love this, but people who are introverted, they might not show up. We're also dressed very casually, even though this is a professional event. This is not acceptable for some people. And we're doing karaoke, which for those of you like me who are terrible singers, we will not be doing karaoke. So when you're looking at your community, you really have to say, what are the cultural biases that we're taking into this community? So software repository GitHub did a study on its own community looking at meritocracy, which is a huge thing in programming. Again, this idea that the best person will get rewarded. And when they broke down how much other engineers liked code of certain contributors, they found out that women's code was actually better than men's code on average until a woman identified her gender. And when she identified her gender, the community discriminated against her. So GitHub knows that they have lots of work to do when it comes to gender on their site. Again, all communities carry bias. It doesn't matter what community you have, there's going to be some bias in it, and it's our job to identify that. So one common thing that we marketers often use when we're building products, when we're building communities, when we're building websites, is to create personas, right? We're trying to market to certain people. Unfortunately, personas can really have biases built into them. So I'm going to use actually an example of Moz's personas. So Moz built a bunch of personas for our search product. And the team did months of research, talked to all these users, and they did an all-staff presentation on them. And the feedback after that presentation was directly relating to two biases that these personas had. The first was all the personas had male names. And the second was that all these personas had these images of a laptop with a hand reaching out to it. And all the photos of those hands were perceived as white. Now, many standard demographic persona research, like sheets you fill out, automatically have gender and race ethnicity. But in Moz's case, both gender and race and ethnicity are not relevant to who Moz's customer is in any way. In fact, when this bias was pointed out, people were pretty shocked and like, oh my gosh, we never would even think like that. So they went back and they changed all the names to be gender neutral, and they also mixed up the hands so they look to be of different race or ethnicities. You can also look at your industry, and you can take those biases and you can invert them and you can use them to a competitive advantage. So in Western society, people doing yoga are usually perceived as skinny white women who are probably from the suburbs. And these plus-size women of color said, we love yoga and we do a really great job at doing yoga. So they built these communities on Instagram where they post photos of themselves doing these really incredibly hard yoga poses to buck against that stereotype. The second myth is that anonymity allows for people to be their authentic selves. So this is the idea that on the internet you can be anonymous and you don't have to worry about your boss firing you for a comment you left on the internet or a family member finding out about something about you that you don't want them to know. Unfortunately, this makes communities really hard to build because there's this old adage of sticks and stones may break my bones, and the internet is all words. So really it turns the second half into words will cripple my pitifully fragile sense of self-worth. And it's not just people being mean on the internet, it's also community managers trying to track down bad behavior. And anonymity makes it super, super hard for community managers to do this, especially when the law is broken. So Reddit had a very famous troll called Violent Acres, and because of Reddit's commitment to anonymity, it was really hard to track down who this guy actually was, even though he was doing very illegal things like running forums on child pornography. And anonymity in general also makes the web less accessible, particularly for people who aren't digital natives. So, and a lot of people, when they think about people who aren't digital natives, like they might point out like their grandmother. I don't think about my grandma when I think about people who aren't digital natives. I think about our lawmakers. Many of our lawmakers are older. They're not digital natives. They're the ones creating the laws that are regulating what's actually happening on the internet. And anonymity makes it even harder for them to understand. Same with law enforcement. So what happens if, you know, something does need to be escalated to the police? So there was a woman who was getting a bunch of death threats and a bunch of rape threats, and she went to the police, and the police said, just don't go on those websites. Well, she was like, what? This is not an acceptable responsibility. So anonymity makes it harder for law enforcement too. So there's 3 things that you can do to, as a community manager, especially in your forums, to help break down anonymity. And yes, I know all 3 things I'm going to suggest, there's like a zillion ways to get around them if you really want to be a troll. But the first is email verification, the second is CAPTCHAs, and the third is tracking people's IP addresses. So you can hopefully start to keep everyone accountable for their behavior. So myth number 3 is that the fewer rules your community has, the better. This is kind of really the idea of the internet and freedom. Unfortunately, this can lead you to actual branding disasters in your community. So I mentioned Reddit already. When they started actually banning topics and banning people from their forum, the community freaked out. They thought Reddit was going away, that Reddit wasn't going to be the place it was going to be, even though the vast majority of the people using Reddit were not breaking laws, were not bad actors. They just really were like, our community is getting changed. Recently on Sunday, it was the Oscars. The Oscars also got some really bad PR for not being diverse and inclusive because their nominees for all the top awards were all white people for the 2nd year in a row. All right, so you're like, well, I don't have a big forum like Reddit, and I'm not a big brand like the Oscars, but this can happen to small brands too. So the Hugo Awards are science fiction writing awards, and in order to vote for them, you get a membership to WorldCon, which is the convention where the awards take place. And over the years, the Hugo Awards have been noted for their diversity and inclusion. Well, last year, a group of straight white men who called themselves the Sad Puppies decided to have an anti-diversity voting block where they went in and particularly only voted for other straight white men. And the Hugo Awards didn't know how to deal with this. They didn't have any guidelines, any rules. This had never happened before. WorldCon's been going on for like almost 100 years, so it's but they didn't have any rules and they didn't know what to do. So I always really suggest for anyone who's building a community or who has a community to build a code of conduct, to implement community guidelines and rules. To get you started, or maybe you need a revamp of the current ones you have, I suggest checking out Geek Feminism. They have a code of conduct that's Creative Commons licensed, and you can adopt it to your needs. So if you are adopting it to your needs, I highly suggest branding the language of your code of conduct. So at Moz, we have core company values called tag fee, and one of those values is empathy. And this is really the whole reason why we even have this code of conduct. So we call out in the code of conduct that people need to be empathetic, especially if you're a community manager who is getting a report of something bad happening on your site. The second one is that you need to think about your brand's specific needs. So on Moz's site, in comments and on our Q&A forum, we have thumbs up and thumbs down. Now, people try to game these thumbs up because you get points if you get more thumbs up, and then you get like t-shirts and dolls and fun things like that. And so we have to watch for people like creating dummy accounts to thumb up comments, and we also have to worry about, maybe someone got in a disagreement with someone and creates an account to go thumb down that person's like every single comment in the past 2 years. So think more about your brand specific needs. If you're like serving an underage audience, you might have things around language. You also want to get explicit to prevent microaggressions. So microaggressions are little digs at people that happen that may not be overtly discriminatory, but they make people feel unwelcome. And it could be something like misgendering someone. It could be referring to someone as attractive. And so this is something that is really important, because if you do need to email someone, because most of us are probably emailing the bad actors in our community since we're all on the internet, And it's easier if you can point and say, like, this is a thing that's in our code of conduct that you are violating. So what happens when you actually do send someone a note being like, oh, that thing you did was not so great? So in my experience, you really get 3 types of reactions, and they're pretty evenly across the board spread. So the first is someone saying, oh, I am so sorry. I did this thing. I didn't even realize it. And they apologize, and they really want to work with you and be part of your community. The second one is silence. And I think there's probably 2 camps in silence. The first being that they are sorry, but they're really embarrassed and they don't know how to deal with the situation. And the second one is that they've just kind of written you and your forum off. And the third response people will sometimes email you back is basically a like, I hate you too, your forum is terrible, which it happens. So it's really important that everyone on your team gets internal training on how to implement your code of conduct and how to deal with people. So the woman on the right is Danny. She's one of our community managers, and she particularly works with a lot of our events. And she is fully trained on our code of conduct that if anything happens, she is one of the people that knows how to deal with it. So a big fallacy, though, around code of conducts and rules is that people will actually tell you about their problems. I had a situation a couple years ago at one of my events where a woman who I know, who I work with, who I consider a friend, was harassed and did not actually tell me that this happened, and I found out later through a third party. And I was like really disappointed because I could have been able to take more action on the situation. And I was also like, you're like a friend. You know this is an important issue for me. So just keep that in mind that people will not necessarily tell you when something happens. So some of those people that write you back and tell you how terrible you are for doing this to them will claim censorship. I briefly just want to note that censorship is really around governments. So unless you're building a community related to the government or that it's actually involved as part of the government, you're not censoring someone. But mainly, you want these rules so you don't have to shut down your community. So Popular Science had to shut down their community. Their community was primarily in their blog comments, and they did a scientific study on their own blog comments and found that when people came in and refuted the scientific articles in a non-scientific nature, that the people reading the scientific articles started disbelieving those articles. And Popular Science's whole point of existence was to teach people about science. So they ended up turning off their comments and shutting down their community. That's really sad. So the fourth myth around diversity and inclusion is that community managers will work for you for free. So this relates to diversity and inclusion because there's only a certain type of person that has that extra time and extra capital that they can be a community manager for free. So a lot of people are like, oh, I have a forum and I have some, built-in automation and the robots will take care of all my moderation needs. I don't even need a community manager. I'm going to save money. Nope, nope. Even companies like Facebook, YouTube, Yelp, and Google actually have people doing human moderation. So if you say report a photo as inappropriate or offensive on Facebook, a person actually looks at that and determines whether or not it's really offensive. And a lot of people will fall into the community management, kind of this like free volunteer trap that we can make our best community members moderate our forum for free. But what you actually don't know is that many volunteers who appear to be free in community management are really compensated with something. So this is a photo of PAX, which is a big video game conference, and they have a whole bunch of community volunteers who help out with a lot of different things. But what most people don't know is that they're actually paid minimum wage. They get tickets to the convention. They get these t-shirts and little pins. They also get a big after party and access to celebrities and vendors before the regular attendees. So they're really compensated. They aren't free. Likewise, if you do have community managers, your community managers need a holiday. This is me and some of my community manager coworkers on holiday. Burnout is a real thing, and it happens, especially when you're doing a lot of community management and you're kind of on all the time. And, you don't want the situation where when your community manager goes away, it becomes a nightmare, because when the cat's away, the mice, they'll play. So it's really important that you train people. You train people on community management. Even if you're the only community manager, that you have someone who can be your backup. So back in the day when Moz only had one community manager, my manager, Jen, and she was doing all the things. She had to go out on an unexpected leave for several months. And no one was trained, but of course we couldn't just stop doing our social media or running our forum. And people jumped in, but those people weren't trained. And on Twitter, people noticed that the voice of us had changed, and it wasn't the same, and it wasn't our brand. And when Jen came back, they were so excited she was back. But really what needed to happen was people needed to be trained. You can also use robots in your advantage to work with your community manager, and you can build an automation for your specific brand needs. So Moz has a big SEO and internet marketing community, and unfortunately this means we get a lot of link spam in our blog comments, and we have a filter that captures about 80% or so of this, and it really helps out us community managers. So myth number 5 is that diversity doesn't affect your company's bottom line. So there was a study done that showed that companies with women on their board, and the board had to be populated with more than 22% women, they actually outperformed companies that had no women or very few women on their boards. So when it came to return on equity, they saw 53% more profit. When it came to sales, it was 42%. And when it came to invested capital, it was 66% more than these companies without gender diverse boards. So why does that actually happen? So the first thing is this idea of synergism, which is the idea that as humans, we are so technologically and sociologically advanced that no one person can really make any huge breakthroughs by themselves. Science has been really big on adopting this idea and getting lots of people working on the same really hard problems. There's this site called Space Warps that displays pictures from high-powered telescopes of our galaxy and relies on their community, which is a bunch of amateur astronomers, to identify and look at these bodies in space, whether they're planets or comets, and then a scientist comes in and verifies, like, oh yeah, this is a black hole, or oh yeah, this is this galaxy from another angle. And they work together on these big problems. So the second thing that really shows how diversity is super impactful is a study by Lou Hong and Scott E. Page, which is called Groups of Diverse Problem Solvers Can Outperform Groups of High Ability Problem Solvers. And they took a computer algo and they created two groups, one of high ability people. So high ability people are usually from the same background. They may have the same socioeconomic state. They could have the same education. They could be of the same race and ethnicity. They can be of the same gender. And then they took a diverse group where some people were low performers, some people were medium performers, some people were high abilities, but they had diverse backgrounds. And when both groups got to a certain point in this problem, they got stuck. And the high ability group could not figure out. They could not move forward. They were stuck. And the diverse group, they actually were able to get understanding from their differences and work through the problem and get much further than the high ability group. And it was because of their backgrounds and their experiences and being able to look at a problem from a different angle. So we've seen a little bit of negative PR around diversity, inclusion, in communities. What about positive PR? So Target recently degendered their toy aisle. The country of Sweden did this a while ago and also got a bunch of press about it. And also startup Slack, they've been getting all these big engineering awards, and they received one recently where instead of just their CEO going up and getting this engineering award, they instead sent 4 black female engineers to accept this award. And it not only sent a message about Slack's commitment to diversity and inclusion, but it also bucked the stereotype of who you think an award-winning engineer really is. So if you're saying, how do I know my community is actually inclusive? You need to start looking at retention of community members as a metric for your community. If people don't see themselves in your community, they won't think that they belong. So at MozCon a couple years ago, we decided to make a commitment to having half men and half women presenting on our stage. And this was because we really believed that there were just as many amazing women speakers as male speakers in our community. So starting in 2013, we had 50-50 gender representation on stage, and we saw something happen in our audience. The community who came to the event actually started changing. So in 2013, we had 10% of our audience were women, and 90% were men. In keeping with this commitment to who we had on stage, in 2014, we saw 21% of our audience was women, and in 2015, it was 31%. This is really amazing, and we were so happy about these numbers, and it was an outcome of who we put on stage. So if you're looking at inclusion and retention, what are 4 metrics that you should focus on? So the first is to make sure that your members are mixing well together. This could be new and old members. This could be different types of members who come from different backgrounds and how well they get along. The second is to reduce the knowledge gap between your new and old members. So at Moz, we have a lot of community members who've been around for a long time who are SEO experts on the cutting edge of their field. And then we have a ton of new people who are just figuring out what this SEO thing is all about coming to our site. So we created the Beginner's Guide to SEO to really help those new members get a grasp on the fundamentals so they can start building up their knowledge and that they can become just as advanced as our older community members. The third metric you want to look at is adoption of community language and symbols. So every community has certain things about it that members identify as part of that community. So with Moz, we have our beloved mascot, Roger, and we also have certain words such as Mozzers, which refers to Moz's staff. Number 4 for metrics is how quickly do new members take ownership of your community. So this is a photo of Will Reynolds, and he's been one of our MozCon speakers, and Will has really made MozCon his own. In the past 2 years, he's given out free things to our community members, and he does this on his own. I help him, but he comes up with ideas, and he does it, and it's all his own thing. So myth number 6 is that diversity and inclusion are just political correctness. I actually got told this morning. And I'm just going to say it's not political to be welcoming and recognize the humanity in others. Privileged groups often think that the communities they're part of are way more diverse than they actually are when you break down the statistics. So this is a group of people at Moz. And I want you to think about, are there more women or men in this photo? Take a second, look at it. All right, so there are more men. There's 60% men in this, and that means there's 40% women. But for those of you who thought that it was 50-50, you aren't alone. If women or minorities make up more than a third of a community, that's 33%, the majority, so in this case we're looking at gender, would be men, believe that the minority's dominating. Even if this is not true, even if they're far from dominating, even if they're still not even equal, it will appear that way. So you need to really pay attention to what your community looks like. So what photos are you showing of your community? This is a knitting community. You can see that like a lot of these photos are of women. There's certain patterns that are shown, certain colors of yarn. What topics are popular in your community? This is Lady Gaga's community, and they have topics around, of course, Lady Gaga's work, but also they have age affinity groups. So this must be something important in Lady Gaga's community. You also need to look at taboo subjects. What are people not talking about, or what are they not allowed to talk about? So Moz's community forum is on SEO and helping people with their internet marketing. And someone said, hey, does anyone have a coupon code to this SEO conference? Well, this isn't something that's acceptable on our community because it's not really what it's about. So our community manager, Matt, jumped in and just said, hey, this is not what we're about, but, you know, good luck getting that coupon code. You can also do demographic surveys. So you may ask people locations, you may ask them gender, you may ask them race and ethnicity. whatever you think is important to your community and where you want to build more diversity and inclusion. Myth number 7, which is our final myth, is that community managers never screw up. We totally screw up all the time. Happens. And what we really need to do is we need to take stock of our own rank and our own power within our communities. So what I'm going to go through now is I'm going to go through 4 types of power, and I'm going to talk about then my own power. So what you want to do is you want to think about that type of power and then make lists about yourself so you can really hone in your perspective. And so the first type of rank and power is social. So this is common societal privileges. This is what we think of when we think of like gender and race and ethnicity. So for myself, some of my social powers is that I'm white, I'm American, I'm thin, I'm average height, I'm kind of this youngish, adultish age at 32. I have a bachelor's degree, I'm in the middle class, and I work in technology. The second type of power is psychological. This has to do with your self-esteem and how comfortable you are with yourself. So for me, I'm very self-confident, I'm self-driven, I'm a frequent traveler. Obviously, I like public speaking. I'm decisive, I can speak up in meetings, and I'm totally okay with dealing with some conflict. The third type of power is spiritual power, which is connecting yourself to something bigger. So this is like a connection to your community. It's not necessarily your religious preferences, though if you are religious, that's definitely a community that you're part of and part of this power. So for me, it's that I feel I have a purpose in my life. I'm part of the event organizer and community manager community. I get a lot of spiritual feeling from writing and reading books. I love to host parties, and I know that I have family and friends who love and care about me. The fourth type of power is organizational, and this could be in your community or it could be like at your work. So for me at Moz, I actually have some organizational power. I'm a very tenured employee here. I've been here over 4 years, which is an old timer at Moz. I'm a full-time employee. I control a $1.3 million budget. I have 10 years of internet marketing experience. I have a reputation for getting stuff done, and I know people who have higher rank than power than me across the company. So there's lots of tests you can kind of take to figure out your privileges. You can also take these implicit bias tests, which tell you things that you're unconsciously discriminating against, even when you think you're just fine. So I took these tests, and it told me that I unconsciously discriminate against religious people of any religion. So that's something I need to work on personally. And you, of course, want to keep educating yourself. And I want to say, there's tons of books out there, tons of articles on diversity and inclusion, but please, if you're trying to learn about someone who's not like you, don't force someone to tell you. Like, you can use the internet, and you can go to your library, and you can figure out how to be more diverse and inclusive. So what if you mess up? What happens? So the first thing you always want to do is empathize with someone. So my manager, Jen, was on stage at MozCon, and she said something racist in front of our huge audience. And someone wrote in and said, wow, this is really offensive. And so Jen wrote back to them and empathized and said, I'm sorry, oh my gosh. And so besides empathizing, she also did a couple things, and she wrote a blog post about this. So she was very sincere in her apology. There's a lot of fake apologies out there on the internet, but Jen says that this has absolutely horrified me since that day. You can tell that she actually feels bad about it. And you have to own your mistake. You can't kind of skirt around the issue. You have to say, yeah, I did that. So Jen says, this person was right. I totally came across as offensive and ignorant. And the final thing you have to do is that you have to learn. You have to educate yourself further, but you also have to, when in your apology, say that you're learning, and sincerely say that you're learning. So Jen here talks about how she lived in Mexico and that she loves Mexico, and she truly doesn't feel that she's ignorant or racist. But again, she reiterates, but she says, but damn, did I come across that way. And that goes a long way to say that this was indeed a sincere thing. So as you're building diversity and inclusion into your community, please don't believe those myths. You can build a diverse and inclusive community. And thank you, everyone, so much. I think we have some time for questions, but if we don't get to them, you can tweet at me, you can email me, and also this presentation is available available at mz.cm/diversity, and you can get it there, and the last slide has a whole bunch of resources that you can further dig in. Thank you very much.
You already answered my first technical question, where we can get slides, if slides will be available, and how we can get you. So you kind of stole two questions from me already. Guys, Reese, do you have a question?
Yeah, hi Erica, hi Zara. Erica, first, it was a wonderful session, all right? Basically, I'm from Pakistan, okay? And I hope you know that country somewhat. Mostly famously known as the terrorists, or the people that you talk about in sense of negative, or you could on the internet world you could call us, the second name is called the scammers, okay? So that's what a lot of people call us, in other words. But I have like a couple of questions, because the thing that you talk today, the thing that the lectures that you gave, or the webinar that you have given, if you pick up this webinar from a country like US and we take it to country as of ours in Pakistan, it's a lot different. It's a lot different. Why? Because the people in the United States, they give more value to their social means, to their society, to their values, and to the culture. But when it comes to Pakistan, it's a lot different. We have a higher priority towards the religion first, okay, and then comes everything else, okay. But what you have taught, what you have said, what if we face everything the opposite way, okay? If you have everything the opposite way here, how can you think I can be positive? Because I do give out speaking sessions, which is usually it's the people start calling me an abnormal thinker now in Pakistan. So I was more into it, like, okay, fine, I'm an abnormal thinker, but if we start talking about realistic approaches in life, I have more Christian friends than I have friends in real life of a Muslim. That's my same religion. Okay, I have more Jewish friends as compared to the people who are more Muslims. The problem that you've been telling us, it's a positive approach, but if you pick up this all points from a community side and bring it to the countries like us, I think it's very difficult. It's not difficult, it's nearly an impossible. Because why? If a guy like me, or a guy like more than me, would come up to you people, I'm sorry, I'm using my French here, it would be like, you guys need to move aside. Okay, it's not about black and white, it's not about black, gray, or white, whatever. It's about, you guys are from Pakistan. Oh, can you just take a side, please? We have to work 10 times more harder to come to that position that you have to work hard only for one time or two times. So for you, or for anyone to say these things, my only one question to you is, can you give me only one step that I can start doing the community building here in Pakistan that would really change the people mindset, and that would really bring change in, that we would be also welcome to the people of another country? Or it's pretty easy for that? Because I see Indian going pretty good, pretty up, but Pakistanis are no, baba, stay away. So can you give me like few steps for that? I would really love to do that. And my apologies for my English. It sucks, I know that.
Oh, your English is really good. But so we actually at Moz, we have a lot of people in our community who are from Pakistan. So like, at least I feel, I know there's a whole bunch of people in the United States that are very, very rude when it comes to people who are in Pakistan, and it's really terrible, unfortunately. But so actually, when I think of people from Pakistan, I think about like one of our best community members, Musa. He's from Pakistan, and I think about how we can change these perceptions, right? We change these perceptions by getting to know each other. You particularly mentioned that you have lots and lots of friends who are of different religions, where the people you interact day to day may not have that. And I feel this is one of the great things about the internet, is that we get to know each other. And in different cultures, the ideas of diversity and inclusion of certain types of people are going to take longer, and it is going to be harder work. And so, I mean, really, my kind of thing is like, stick in there, like, keep doing the really good work, and you can make it happen. You may have to frame some of, like, what you think of when you think of culture. You may have to dig in even deeper into those biases. You may have to have a lot more conversations with people. Yeah, those like hard conversations, you probably will have to have a ton more of them, unfortunately. And every little bit happens, and with the people that you can especially the people you can influence. So the people that you're going to be most influential are going to be the people who are in your identity group. So the people who are like you. So you're going to be most influential with other men from Pakistan who are Muslim, who think like you, or think like you culturally, and you can relate to them the best. And I really suggest, if you're particularly struggling with certain issues like that, you can create allies with other people who care, who aren't like you, and then you kind of just build on it slowly. Like, you slowly get there, and over time, hopefully things will get better. I'm an optimist that as the internet grows and changes, we're going to meet people from all over the world, and we're going to start thinking of things differently. Like, when I hear about, disasters, whether they be natural or terrorism or whatever, in different countries, the first thing I think of, because I have friends across the global community, is not like, who did that or what the heck's going on. It's, oh my gosh, are my friends safe? And I think that's a completely different mentality. And at least I really hope that with the global internet, that's where we're going. So I hope that answered
Okay,
something,
thank
or
you very
gave you.
much. Yeah, and about Musa. Musa is my best friend. Like, he's my buddy.
He's awesome. I adore Musa.
Yeah. Okay. He's awesome. You said that, but I call him like he's totally gone off. But thank you very much, Erica, for your wonderful session. I'll probably hook you up. Okay. Probably get connected on Twitter, or we'll probably send you an email or get in touch with you. Okay.
Definitely.
But thank you very much for the wonderful session.
I'm
Thank you very
glad you
much.
enjoyed it.
Zara, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I really like the presentation. I like the guidelines. I was a moderator in a community on Google Plus community for quite some time, and issues do come up, because you might want to think about this, because one of the goals of the community was to be open and inclusive, and to bring in people from all over the world. And at the same time, we had some very strict guidelines in the community about how to participate and how to treat other people. And so part of the moderator's job was to, one, screen people who asked to come in. It wasn't open. You had to ask to come in, and sometimes we had to have some serious conversations with people in order for them to join the community, and also for moderators to, if people break the rules and you tell them they're breaking the rules and they don't respond, or they keep doing what they were doing, you just have to say, okay, that's it. You're not meeting the guidelines, and this isn't the community for you. Goodbye. Because it does take a lot of work. It's not like, you set up a community and everything just magically happens. It takes so much work, especially if you have created an ideology, one, and the guidelines, two, to really make that community stay focused on what it's all about. It takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication, and so when you're creating a community, you need to be very clear. That's what I loved about your presentation, is like, have the guidelines in place. You know, it's if you're starting up a new community, to have the guidelines in place, it's so much better than chasing someone who's inappropriate for your community, whatever that might be. So it's better to have the guidelines, and then you can refer to those guidelines and say, hey, you know, our community is about this, and our guidelines are this. And I noticed that you've been whatever in the community, which is some activity that is outside of the guidelines, and you need to point out to those people that they are outside of the guidelines. And I loved your responses, the sorry and the silence and the and the angry response, because that's exactly what happens. And if you create a community, you have to be ready. You have to be ready for all of those responses, and to deal with them, and to select people who are also moderators in your community who are comfortable in being that way. And it's like, there's a whole, in the United States, there's this whole thing about being nice, and the original definition of nice is precise and mediocre, and I don't want to be nice. Anyway, I loved it. That was just, it was so spot on, and it is a lot of work. And I was involved in the nonprofit world for about 10 years, quite a while ago now, but it's the same kind of thinking applies, as like, we're doing this good thing, and so everything should just be cool, and we don't have to keep books because we're doing this good thing. And it's like, no, hello, if you want to stay a nonprofit organization, you need to keep your books, and you need to do your financial reporting and all of those things. And it's the same thing in a community. If there are guidelines and you're willing to be part of that community, contribute, be sensitive to others, and follow the guidelines. They're there for a purpose. Okay, I'm getting off my soapbox.
Well, I have actually a question or comment. I don't know. These communities you're talking about, well, you kind of scare me to death with all these rules. Because we can talk about democracy and everything, but these communities is completely outside of any democracy, completely autocracy. So you build your community and it's your rules.
I mean, you can kind of look at it as if your community is your living room. So it's your brand's living room, right? If someone came over to your house, and like, if you come over to my house, you have to take your shoes off. Sorry, that's the rules. And you wouldn't go over to someone's house who asked you to take your shoes off and, wear your muddy boots and stomp around in them. So that's really how, when I look at brands, communities, and when I think about, the rules that we put in our community, we are putting them for specific reasons, whether it's, to make sure that our community stays on topic, on message, whether it's because we need to create some sort of safe space, or because we have this focus on diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, it makes all the sense for brand and community. You're a holder of a brand, and obviously you want to brand this be, I don't know, white, and this is high, and everything. If we're talking about slightly broad about community, like Zara was talking about Google Plus, we just with Zara, as I understand, we got in some Google Plus community, Polar Bear or something like that. And my question was, are any rules here? And the answer was, well, no sticking rules, whatever. Yeah, whilst it's 10 people, fine. But why don't you think a bigger community, not brand community, not belongs to some brands, it not belongs to Moz or Coca-Cola, but just general learning community, could not be Okay, audio is good. Could not be democratic. No, we can use robots. I know you are against robots, but we still can use robots, and we count every single vote for community member. Could it be built this way?
You could definitely look at it from that way, or you can look at it from a founding member perspective. So I've also been involved in the nonprofit world, and the nonprofit I was involved with was particularly interested in getting women more visibility in like technology and other like kind of geeky, stereotypically male. Oh, somehow my microphone muted itself. Okay, I'm back. So what we decided that when we were like, okay, we're building a community and we're going to need guidelines and rules, while we didn't put the rules to like vote with the community, though you could definitely do that aspect, we did have the staff that was working on this project, which was like 25 people or so, talk and discuss about like the language we were going to use. Were we going to call this group a feminist group? That came up, and you know, it was mostly, I mean, it was probably like 18 women and 2 men in this group. And even though we had this commitment, which was a very feminist commitment as the foundation of our group, they decided not to use feminist in the word, like the word feminist in our mission statement due to that. So I do think that there are ways that you can set up community guidelines and you can work with your community, but it's really something that you need to do at the foundation, which at that point you may not have anyone besides your staff.
Yeah, I agree. It has to be a foundation. You made the analogy about your room. Also, somebody came to your house and you tell them to take shoes off. But of course, if it's a brand like Moz community, yeah, you are the boss. But if you're looking at just general community, you can have a different analogy. Country or city, and here everybody has the same right. Well, supposedly. No, but our democracy comes from Greek democracy, which used to be supposedly a straight direct democracy. Everybody vote for everything. And now it's not as a representative democracy, but we have a technology actually to make the democracy a direct democracy. Well, so probably our computer power is good enough, so we can vote actually on almost everything. We can vote on every single law. So we don't give a representation. We don't vote for our representative. Instead of, we just sit down and vote for laws, which is and little community, well, little compared to the country, might be a good experiment how it will be. Well, just suggestion.
It could be a very interesting experiment. I mean, we'll see what the future brings, right? And there's different ideas, especially when it comes to voting on laws and democracy and representative versus voting on every issue. In the state I live in the U.S., we have to vote on like every single tax issue because of a different law that was voted in. And people have mixed feelings on that. People love voting. Some people are like, yes, I want to vote on every single tax issue. I will learn about this. And other people are like, oh, why can't we repeal that law that requires us to vote on every single tax issue?
No, but
so there's mixed
it's
camps.
difficult. You have to go somewhere and everything. If it comes just like a survey, like a monkey survey, you just tick a right box in your computer. Before that, you put your smart card or something just to make sure it's you voting. Yeah, it should be easy. Okay, I have one technical question, much closer to what you were saying. We had Richard Milligan here, and he was talking about similar things. And the question was about you have a registration, or you have a form which people ask to be accepted, and you accept them, or it's just registration. Which one you vote for? But okay, Moz in a strength position. Obviously, everybody wants to be, well, everybody's in industry wants to be a part of a Moz. But if you're running a kind of smallish community, what would you suggest? Would you suggest registration form or form where you accept people? So people has to ask.
I think it really depends on your aims of the community. There's definitely power in invite-only communities, but there's also power in anyone can sign up for that community. And it really depends on your end goals and how you want that community to focus. But you can do, you can do diversity and inclusion in both those types of groups. Obviously, if it's invite-only, it's going to be way more purposeful than it will be if you're just letting people come.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, depends on what you want to achieve. And the same follow-up question, quality or quantity? And again, not from Moz position. Moz is easy to get quantity. Just say, who wants to be with Moz? Yeah, easy. But if it's somebody, well, okay, Mr. X, nobody knows, and he's trying to achieve community. What would your first choice would be? Go for quality or quantity?
I'm a big fan of quality over quantity. I would rather, if you have a community of, let's say, 100 members, and if those 100 members are super engaged with you and they're responding and they're really active and they're providing a lot of value to your community, that's way better than if you have, 10,000 members and you only have like 50 really active people. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap. We see it a lot on social media with people trying to get a lot of followers. But if your followers aren't interacting with you, if they're not interacting with what you're sending out, it's not like worth your, like how much of your time and effort is put into gaining those followers when they're not doing anything with you, when they're not engaging. So definitely I'm a big fan of quality over quantity.
Yeah, but it's easy to say when you already have 1,000 or a couple of thousand active members, and when you don't have a quality, I mean, at all, you have 2 members or 3 members, quality doesn't help you, does it? If you have some amount of members, you have you can think of kind of trying to convert them from, well, low active to very active. But if you have 2,
yeah,
that's it.
Well, then you got to focus on your growing of your community. I mean, I would say that there's communities even in SEO that are pretty small. So Local U, they're a great resource for education about local SEO. Local SEO is a subset of SEO, so there's not going to be as many people interested as like general SEO. Their forum, I think, is like around 100 members, and they put on conferences all around, and they love putting on conferences that like 60 people show up because they get to have that sort of hands-on experience with those people. They get to do really in-depth Q&A. They get to really help them with the problems on their website versus they're not, like, we've worked with them to do some workshops and we've partnered with them a little bit, but they're not interested in like the MozCon, 1,500 people in a room because they can't have those one-on-one experiences. And like, I mean, from a kind of an event runner perspective, there's like different types of people, speakers that do really, really well with that, like 60% of people, like 60 people in a room where they can interact with them and they can do that one-on-one work versus, someone speaking in front of 1,500 people. It's a different mindset. And I would say like they get extreme value, even though they don't have a lot of people in that forum, even though they don't have a lot of people coming to their actual conference. The people who do come get a lot of value, and they get a lot of value out of being with their community.
Oh, great. We have Jane Morgan with us. She kind of late for 1 hour and 11 minutes. I don't know what happened to her. But Jane, can you hear us? Interesting. You're late. Oh, well, she cannot hear us. Or we cannot hear her. I don't know. Zara had a problem with connection as well. She couldn't stay because she had no audio. It had to go. Unless Jane will come to life now, I don't have more questions from audience. I have my personal question. I can't really distribute too much. Okay. Thank you very much, Erica. It was very interesting. We have as I said, we had second webinar on this issue, but this one was very, very different. Jane Morgan left. Okay. I don't know what happened to Jane Morgan. She's Irish SEO. She's got a company and everything. she's actually give me a stick so many times that we don't have enough women and we don't have enough diversity, which is not true. It's not true. Okay, Erica, thank you very much for being with us. It was a great pleasure. Thank you everybody who were with us. Zara said that Hangouts didn't work properly tonight. I don't know what happened. Jane Morgan were 1 hour and something late, which is I don't know. Never mind. These things happen. Thank you very much, Erica. I hope one day we'll see you again with new ideas and new myths to break. Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone so much.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Erica answer that she could be contacted. I'll make double sure, so I'll put her Twitter or her Twitter is already on our page. So what is the best way to contact? Is it Twitter?
Yeah, you can definitely tweet at me. I'm McGillivray there. You can also email me. I'm just erica@moz.com, and I'll be definitely sharing my slide deck so you can go back and look at all the fun again.
That's very easy. Erica@moz. Great.
Yep.
I love your email. Okay, thank you very much, Erica. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see you again this week. We have 2 more webinars a week and every week. Okay, thank you very much, and goodbye.